Hi, hello. I think that we are like, just 1 second. Vamos, va con retraso esta. Ya está. Okay, now it's time. Okay. Thank you very much for joining our masterclass. During the next hour, I'm going to explain about stability. This is a really important point in pastry. Always in my trips, I explaining always at the beginning what is stability in pastry, and today I'm going to explain how to achieve a perfect and stable pastry creations. This is very important because when we work in pastry, always we are focused on create the best experience, but also in order to create this experience, it's important to understand where comes from the stability in order to have perfect balanced textures that we can, for example, freeze, thaw, and we will have the same or similar texture after the freezing process, or these creations, they can travel, for example, during a short time to another place when we are buying in the pastry shop and we need to bring at home. And after this process, these recipes and this creation will be perfect balance, okay? So we are going to be focused on that. I'm going to invest, I think, around 30 minutes in order to explain the stability in different directions. Then I'm going to explain to you what is the big concept method that we created a new landing page that you can go to jordibordas.com. Now, Cassandra and Anna, they are going to share with you the link, and you can visit this landing in order to see our course of formulation that you will find all this information. But anyway, I'm going to explain what is the concept method and why we created this method, because I think that is very important to know, to understand. And this method is changing the life of a lot of pastry chefs every time that we travel to other countries like France, that we've been like the last 3 weeks we've been there teaching in the Notre School in Paris, and also we've been in Korea, we've been in Hong Kong and US, and always when we teach this method, people is amazed, and we love that much because they discover pastry in another direction, okay? But just I'm going to start explaining about the problems, the solutions, about the stability. Then I'm going to explain what is the concept and why it's interesting for you to learn the concept. And then I'm going to explain the recipes that we have here, because here we have a really good recipes, perfectly stable, and then we have recipes that are non-stable with a lot of syneresis, water linking out, and I want to explain this process, where they come from, okay? So let's go to start with the first part of the presentation. In general, the most common problems that we can find in pastry always when we freeze and thaw are syneresis or cut texture or split textures. These in general are recipes that are based in water, like for example, gel textures, compotes, creamy textures in any direction, in any use that you can use in pastry, or aerated textures like mousses. What's happened with this kind of textures? When we freeze and thaw, the water expands like 10% more or less. And this water that expands, because what we do is to transform water in ice crystals, not all the water, but a part of the water that we have inside of the recipe is transformed to ice crystals, and these ice crystals, they expand and they break the structures that we created. For example, preparing a crème anglaise, or preparing a mousse, or preparing an emulsion process. Through this process of freezing and thawing, what we do is just, let's go to say, to destroy a little bit the woodwork that we did during the process of production of the recipe. And sometimes, not always, we have this problem that is, the problem is that the recipes leak water outside, and this comes because this process of freezing and thawing, what makes in the texture is we have like free water that is linking out after the freezing process, okay? Another problem is split texture or grainy texture. I will explain the solution of that, because for this reason always we have solutions, but we need to understand first where comes from stability. That means that the most common problems that we can find in pastry creations are grainy texture, split textures in classic recipes, modern recipes, it doesn't matter. And then also we have water leaking out, okay? Perfect. Let's go to move to the next part of the explanation that I'm going to explain. What is syneresis in pastry? Is a separation of the liquid. No, this comes from the same process of freezing and thawing. No, when we create, for example, a crème anglaise, or we create crème anglaise is an emulsion, or we prepare a recipe like mousse, or like creamy texture, or like gel texture with pectin, for example. All these ingredients, jelly agents, thickening agents, emulsifying agents, what they do is just to control the water in our recipes. But in the process of freezing and thawing, always, no, we have a part of the water that became free. It's not linked anymore to these molecules. And for this reason, this water in general, what's happening is that after the thawing process is going, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's linking out, okay? So this is the problem that we have with syneresis, with the free water that we have after the thawing process. Also in recipes that are not well formulated, even without freezing and thawing process, we have the same problem. So what we need to do in this case, in this kind of syneresis problems is, in general, to increase dry extract, that I will explain a little bit later what is it, no? Increase dry extract, water catchment capacity, that means that introduce ingredients that they have high water catchment capacity, and use more techniques. But I'm going to explain on the next presentation, on the next part of the presentation. So, syneresis, free water linking out of the recipe, and this is not so lovely. I remember when I was 14, 15 years old, that I was starting in the pastry world. I was a really young guy without any knowledge about pastry, and I was just working in my parents' business. And always when I had this problem was like a nightmare. Why this happens? Why I have this problem? And why the same recipe, sometimes there is water leaking out, and then there is other times that I'm going to prepare exactly the same recipe and we don't have water leaking out. No? And this was a nightmare for me. And after became world pastry champion in 2011, I started to work in order to try to understand how it works pastry, how works molecules, how works ingredients, techniques, in order to try to solve these kind of problems. And finally, we find the solution, But I remember that the first times my friends, and this is something that if you already meet me, always I explain at the beginning of my presentation, I explained this, that I had this problem of syneresis, and I was calling my friends, and my friends was telling me, put more gelatin, Jordi, put more gelatin. And gelatin not the solution. Gelatin only increase the texture, and we are losing the experience, but the stability doesn't come from here, and this is not the solution, not the perfect solution, okay? So syneresis, water leaking out in any kind of creamy textures, compotes, gel textures, mousses, aerated textures, in any kind of pastry that we can use, in any kind of pastry recipes that you can use in pastry, okay? Then we have a split texture, cut, a split texture, and this is like, we can see a lot of times in classic recipes, that is like, with a spoon, we are going just to try to have a little bit of creamy texture, and we can see that the texture is not completely fine and creamy, has a small split. We can see a little bit of water also linking out. It's not water linking out as we have here, in the plate, but it's just like free water in the texture, and the texture became grainy, okay? This is another problem, and the solution comes also on the way to introduce more dry extract in the recipes, more control of the emulsion, and use thickening agents inside of the recipe. I will introduce this solution on the next part of the presentation. So, one main problem is water leaking out of the recipe. This is for the thawing and for the freezing and thawing process that breaks the structure of the water. and makes that this water is free. And then the other problem that we have is a split or cut texture that is for the same, for the freezing and thawing process. Because when we don't freeze, in general, we don't have such kind of problem. But when we freeze and thaw, a lot of times, even in classic recipes, we have this problem, okay? So let's go to see the next, no? That means that in pastry, always, no? I have a picture in my mind always that every day when we go to work, to pastry is like a kind of balance, no? It's a balance between the water that we have on the recipes, always when we are preparing recipes in general, big picture, no? I have like this picture in my mind. We have like a kind of a scale, no? Imagine a kind of a scale, and in one side we have water, and in the other side we have the dry part of the ingredients that we use in pastry. We call this dry extract, okay? That means that in general, always when we are preparing recipes, big picture, we are trying to balance between the water that we have in the recipe and dry part of the ingredients that we are using on the recipes, okay? Why this is so important? Because all this part, no, that we call dry extract is going to control the water that we have in the recipes. And always when we are preparing, for example, a crème anglaise, a chocolate mousse, a sponge, a sablé, a croissant dough, a crumble, any kind of preparation of recipe in pastry, in general, big picture, because there is recipes that they don't have water, but in general, big picture, 98% of the recipes, always we are trying to balance between water and dry extract, okay? And no dry ingredients, dry extract of the recipes is the key points that they are going to control, the key ingredients, the key molecules that they are going to control the water that we have in the other side. It depends what kind of textures we are preparing. We have more or less water, no? For example, when we have gel texture or compote textures, here in general we have around 30% dry extract and 70% of water. That means that this a small percentage, that is the 30% of dry extract, is going to control 70% of water in the recipe, okay? Then if we move, for example, to creamy texture, in general, in creamy texture, we have like 40% of dry extract, and then we have 60% of water. Here we have less water, so it seems that it's easy to control the water, but it's not like that. Creamy textures are really complex. When we move to mousses, the same. In mousses, we have around 30, 35, 40, 45. It depends the family of flavor that we are working with the recipe. That all this part is dry extract, and the rest, until 100%, always is water. Okay, so it depends what kind of recipe we are going to use. We will need to use a different percentage of dry extract and water in order to stabilize the water through the dry extract that we have on the recipes, okay? Then if we move to a sablé, for example, in a sablé it's different. In a sablé we have 90% of dry extract and 10% of water. If we move to crumble, the same. Crumble has 4 or 5% of water and even 95% of dry extract, okay? So it depends what kind of recipes we are using, no, and we are going to prepare in order to build the stability, the balance between the quantity of dry extract and water that we have on the recipe. We will need to work in different percentage and different way of creation or formulation the recipe. In general, when we have recipes that are stable, this is because the formulation was well done. No? When we have recipes that they are linking water out, no? That they are split, that they are not stable to the freezing, thawing process, or, for example, transportation process. All these problems, they come because the formulation part of the texture was not well managed, okay? So let's go to see what is the solution about these two topics that are water linking out and grainy or cut textures in pastry. Okay, just 1 second, I'm coming back. because we have the aircon, I was freezing. Here it seems Korea now. What are the main factors that influence the stability of the recipe? This is what I was explaining to you, no, at the beginning of the presentation. What we need to control, how much percentage of dry extract we have in the recipe. In general, for example, in mousses, less than 30% of dry extract, we will have problems with the stability. With creamy textures, it's around 35–40% dry extract. Less than that, we have problems with the stability. Mousses is also around 30%. This can be different in different families of flavors. No? For example, when we explain the concept method, the formulation, our formulation course, we explain always from different families because we have, for example, fruits that they are based in water and they don't have too much dry extract, and here we will need to work in different parameters. And for example, we are going to work with nuts or with chocolates or with dairy products. Okay, so it depends what kind of ingredients we are using in the recipe. This can be a different percentage and different way to balance the recipe. But we need to understand that, okay, Jordi, I have water leaking out, as you can see here in the plate that later I will show you. Okay, I have water leaking out. This is because we don't have enough dry extract in the recipe. Okay, this is one part that is important. Then there is another parameter that is water catchment capacity. Okay, and Jordi, what is water catchment capacity? There is molecules like, for example, fibers, like starch, like proteins, that they have the ability to catch the water, and this is amazing for us because helps us to control through the freezing and thawing process this water. So when I have this problem that I have water leaking out of the recipe, another solution can be increase the ingredients that they have high water catchment capacity in my recipe. That means that when I'm going to formulate, I'm going to introduce more, for example, thickening agents, no? Like, for example, guar gum, xanthan gum, or flax fiber, for example, that are thickening agents that they have a huge ability to catch the water and helps us to the freezing and thawing process. When I have the same problem, water leaking out, another solution can be increased dry extract in my recipes. And then another solution that is not dry extract and is not water catchment capacity is introduce more techniques. No? For example, when we are working with a gel texture, we can work only with gelation. But there is some jelly agents that are not so stable, not to the freezing and thawing process, like gelatin. Gelatin in general for the freezing and thawing process is not so interesting. Always needs to work in team with a thickening agent. So we have to work gelation process, gelation technique with gelatin, and if we have syneresis in our recipe, no, water leaking out, we need to introduce a thickening agent, like for example, xanthan gum or guar gum or locust bean gum or even starch, okay, any thickening agent, and work in team, because like that we have two techniques that they control the water of my recipe. It's not the same to have a compote just with pectin and have a compote with pectin that is gelation and xanthan gum that is thickening. The xanthan gum and pectin, they are going to work together in order to control the water that we have in that recipe. That means that the more techniques we introduce, like emulsion, aeration, thickening, gelation, for sure all these techniques, they give us the ability to build the experience, to build the structure of the recipe, for sure. But also what they do, all of them, is control the water that we have on the recipe. So the solution always when we have water leaking out in our recipe is to, okay, let's go to think about what Jordi tell us in the Masterclass. And not the solution, one solution can be introduce more dry extract in my recipe. Okay, this is one solution. Another solution is to introduce ingredients that they have high water catchment capacity or molecules that they have high water catchment capacity, like what? Like starch, like thickening agents or fibers, for example, or for example, like proteins. All these molecules, they have a high binding capacity with the water, okay? And then another solution is to introduce more techniques. I will explain this through the examples of the recipes that we have here a little bit later, okay? So solutions can be or more dry extract, or more water catchment capacity, or more techniques. And sometimes we apply 2, or we apply 3. That means that I can have a recipe that needs more dry extract, and I'm going to introduce more dry extract and reduce water in my recipe. I'm going to introduce ingredients that they have high water catchment capacity, and I'm going to introduce another technique in order to control the water that I have in my recipe. So this is where comes from the stability in pastry in recipes like gel, compote, creamy, in any direction that we are going to use creamy textures, or mousses. It's not, the solution is not put more gelatin, Jordi. No, this is not the solution. The solution is more dry extract, more water catchment capacity, and more techniques. This is something that we created already 10 years ago. We've been studying in order to understand how is the way to formulate a recipe, creating a perfect balance, and this is the solution. And because we created and we have a large experience of this, I can guarantee that this will be always the solution when we have a problem with syneresis in your recipe. Okay, let's go to move now to a split texture or cut texture, that can be creamy or sometimes even aerated textures. And what are the solutions here? Are a little bit similar, okay, but they change a little bit. Okay, so when we have a split texture, in general can be because we don't have enough dry extract, okay, so we need to increase the dry part of the ingredients or introduce ingredients like, for example, fibers like inulin, that they are going to increase dry extract and reduce water in my recipe, okay? So introduction of more dry extract, then introduce more techniques in my recipe, like, for example, emulsification, aeration, thickening, gelation. All these techniques, they control the water and the binding properties of the recipe. Through all these techniques, and mainly emulsification and thickening are the two more important when we have grainy textures. These techniques, and the most important, emulsion and thickening, they helps us to control the water that we have in the recipe and avoid this problem and has, after the freezing and thawing process, a perfect and amazing texture. And then we have fibers, fibers like inulin, corn fiber, war gum, xanthan gum, any kind of fibers that they have high water catchment capacity, that they helps us to control the grainy texture. This can happen in classic recipes. Grainy texture is for all kind of recipes. Even working with, for example, milk chocolate creamy with creme anglaise and gelatin, sometimes we freeze and thaw and we have grainy texture. Lemon curd or lemon cream, the classic lemon cream, sometimes we freeze and thaw and we have this grainy texture, and even sometimes we have water leaking out. So the solution will be in that direction. For example, in a classic creme anglaise, if we have this problem, in general, what I do is to introduce more emulsifier or a fiber, like, for example, xanthan gum or war gum, in order to control better the water in the freezing and thawing process. Why in lemon cream, I apply this solution, more emulsifier or a thickening agent in my recipe? Because in general, this kind of recipes, classic recipes of lemon curd or lemon cream, they have a lot of dry extract. And the problem is not dry extract. The problem in general in this kind of classic recipes is because or they don't have enough emulsion capacity or they don't have enough water catchment capacity through a thickening agent. And we need to introduce, for example, a thickening agent. Sometimes just adding 0.2% of war gum, that is a natural fiber that has high water catchment capacity, it's a perfect solution in order to solve this problem and also the syneresis problem, okay? So let's go to a stop here. I'm going to introduce the big concept method because I want to explain to you what is big concept method, because we've been long time working in order to create this method, and I want to share with you in a simple presentation. This is also for explain that next July 7th, no? July 7th. We are going to start with the program of the Concept Pastry and Formulation program, that this is 100% online. And I want to explain not the program, but why we created this method and why you need to learn this. Okay, what is the concept method? The concept method is a method to formulate your own recipes from scratch. Okay, to create your own recipes from scratch, adapted to your needs. Okay, this started 11 years ago. If I explain a little bit of my history, it's like 11, 12 years ago already, when I win the Coupe du Monde in Lyon, in France. Here I realized that I didn't know anything about pastry. It was unbelievable to become world pastry champion, but then you see that technically and the part of science in pastry, you don't understand anything. And you cannot change the recipes, and you cannot adapt the recipes to, for example, to my needs. At this moment, I was just taking care a lot of everything that I was eating every day, but then I realized that I was directly killing the people with my pastry products, using a lot of sugar and a lot of refined carbohydrates. That is a huge problem that we have in the society. Overconsumption of sugar, overconsumption of refined flours is a huge problem for our health. So I was trying to manage this situation and change my recipes, and was very difficult moment because I understood that, wow, I don't understand anything in pastry. I just know to copy-paste recipes, and that's it. And here I started with the concept method. A method to formulate, in my case, was to formulate my own recipes from scratch. Okay, why? Why the concept method, and how it works, the concept method? How it works, okay? We start by analyzing the needs of the market and the consumer. This is very important, because each market, each consumer is different. It's not the same to prepare a product or create or formulate a recipe for Spain. Even inside of Spain, we are based in Barcelona. This is the north of Spain. For example, the culture of the sweetness is different than the south. People understand sweetness different in north and south. So when we are going to formulate a recipe, we need to understand perfectly the market and the consumer in order to align texture, experience, intensity of flavor, sweetness to this customer, because if not, the customer will come one time and then will never come back. Okay? Always, this for me it's super important. We are traveling a lot. This year we've been traveling to US, we've been traveling to Asia, to Korea, to Hong Kong. Are completely different markets. American market, more sweet, more fatty textures they need, because they are used to taste pastry in that direction. When you move to Asia, it's completely different. Less sweetness, more light texture, the intensity, acidity, bitterness, they don't like. So it depends what part of the world you are. The customers, they are going to be different, and you need to formulate in different direction. And this is something that we explain when we explain the concept method and how to formulate the recipes from scratch. Okay? Let's go to the second point that we do. We study the function of its ingredient, techniques, and the process. How we are going to change the recipes if we don't understand the function of the ingredients or techniques that we are using, how it works, emulsion, why in classic pastry we use egg yolks, for example, or cream inside of the recipes, because we are working with emulsion. But if we don't understand how it works, emulsion, how we are going to create a perfect stable creations or perfect creamy textures. So we need to understand ingredients. We need to understand molecules, what is protein, how it works proteins in pastry. We need to understand fibers. We need to understand starch, sugars, techniques, how it works, emulsion technique, how it works gelation or thickening or aeration. And then the process, because it depends the process that we are going to apply, the result will be one or another completely different. And then finally, we need, what we do is to formulate an innovative recipe and align to the market needs because this is the most important thing, no? So analyzing the market first, then understand the function of the ingredient techniques and process, and finally to formulate in the right direction in order to align everything and have a good business that works amazing, okay? Why I created this method? Here I come back a little bit of, in my history. And the most important for me was to become independent. I'm a kind of person that I cannot be doing something that I don't understand very deep. So because I'm pastry chef and I'm working in pastry, I want to understand everything that happens inside of my recipe. If, for example, in my life I was working in another direction, it will be exactly the same. So for me it was really important to be independent, to be free in order to create my own recipes. And today, 100% of the recipes that we teach in our school, 100% they are created from us. So sponge, crumble, creamy textures, compote, gel textures, any kind of dough that we teach here, any kind of recipe that we teach here, 100% created for us. So to be independent, why? Here I wanted to stop it copy-paste, because what I was doing 15 years ago, 12 years ago, was just taking recipes of other chef books and using these recipes in my presentations. And these recipes, they were not aligned to my values, my needs that I needed in that moment or that I need now, okay? The next point was develop pastry creations aligned to my needs, and the needs of my customers. This is so important. If I have a business, for example, imagine that one day, why not, I'm going to move to China, to live in China, and the customers are completely different. In China, we have to work with less sweetness because they don't understand the culture of the sweetness like we understand in Europe or in America. I need to reduce the acidity, the bitterness they don't like. So I need to align perfectly my pastry products in my shop to the customer. And this is really important. Why? Because if not, the customer is going to come one time, they are going to taste, they will see that they are not aligned to their needs and the culture of the taste and the experience, and they will never come back to your business. So bye-bye business, okay? Let's go to the next point. Maximize the main flavor in all the recipes. This is something that always I explain. If you already meet me, you know that in my presentations always I say we have two ingredients in pastry that are dairy products and egg yolks that they just destroy a lot of times, not always, because we use them, but when we need to use. But a lot of times they destroy the real and the intensity flavor that we need in our pastries. If we are going to work with mango, for example, and mango has enough sugar, so if we are going to create a recipe with a big percentage of mango puree inside or mango fruit inside, naturally present we have already sugars that they are going to sweet in general the recipe. But if I'm going to add, for example, cream, whipped cream, milk, egg yolks to this recipe, mango, bye-bye, see you later. There will be no mango here. So always when I'm going to create a recipe, I want to maximize the flavor of my recipe and in the main ingredient that I'm using in my recipe. So when I work with mango, I don't use dairy products and egg yolks. When I work with chocolate, dark chocolate, we go to the other side of the world to have the beans, In South America, we bring to Europe, we transform, we produce chocolate, for example, and then when we have this chocolate, that is amazing work that they did on the rising process of the cacao beans, fermentation process, and all this is a magic process. This ingredient arrived to us, and we start to add milk, cream, egg yolks, and destroy the real flavor of these cacao beans that they've been coming from the other side of the wall, no? So for me, it's really important to respect the main ingredient of the recipe or the main ingredients, because sometimes we have different ingredients that they build the flavor that we need in our recipe. So in order to maximize the main flavor of my recipe, this was another point for me that was important, and for this reason I decided to create the big concept method. Then solve what we are explaining today, water linking out of the recipe. Call your friends, put more gelatin. This is not the solution, So I wanted to solve the problems and to understand every time that I have problems with my stability or grainy texture, water linking out, I know the solution. And I apply this solution, done, finished the problem, okay? So another point for me was to solve the stability during the freezing and thawing process or storage of the pastry products, even without freezing process. Understand how to substitute ingredients. As I was explaining, I was trying to reduce sugar, I was trying to reduce refined carbohydrates that we know that they are really aggressive for the health of the people. I was trying to remove dairy products in order to create recipes lactose-free, for example, or plant-based recipes, and it was impossible because I didn't know how to substitute the ingredients that we have on the recipes, like, for example, sugar, how to reduce sugar, or how to remove sugar, and what options I have in order to create, for example, a perfect product for a diabetic person, So these kind of solutions I wanted to understand in order to apply in my pastry. And finally, really interesting, the last point is to systemize process to reduce cost and use time efficiently. There is a lot of process. I remember like 3 weeks ago, we've been in France teaching 21 pastry chefs from all over France, mainly from Paris, really important pastry chef. And we've been working together during 4 days in order to explain the concept method, and they were amazed, how we can change some process in the classic recipes in order to save time and win more money, okay? One example, why today we prepare crème anglaise, I'm going to explain what's happening here in Spain, We have, in our productions, in general, we use egg yolks that are pasteurized, milk that is pasteurized, cream that is pasteurized. And in general, when we prepare a crème anglaise, we bring until 84 degrees. And then if it's, for example, a chocolate creamy, just mix with the chocolate, blend in order to create a perfect emulsion, and that's it, okay? And my question to them was, okay, this recipe and process was created 80 years ago, but do we need today to pasteurize egg yolks that are already pasteurized, cream, milk? Do we need to pasteurize another time? Or we can go directly, we can just hit around 36 degrees where all the fatty acids of these ingredients, they will be completely melted. So I mix egg yolks, milk, cream. If I have sugar, I heat around 36, 40 degrees. I blend, in order to create an emulsion. I melt my chocolate, 45 degrees. I mix both preparations, go. I have a perfect creamy. If you want, just take one recipe, a classic recipe that you have, and do this. Do the process like I explained to you without cooking process. And you will see that you are going to save a lot of time. Italian meringue, the same. There are recipes like macarons that we need to use Italian meringue, okay? Because the way to produce Italian meringue gives us the kind of final product that we have in macaron. But in mousses, for example, it doesn't make sense to use Swiss meringue, Italian meringue, French meringue full of sugar. All these recipes are old-fashioned, old school, full of sugar. And now we don't need sugar. We need to reduce sugar. We need to increase the experience. We need to increase the main flavors of the recipes, okay? And my question was to them, do we need to use this kind of meringues in a mousse, for example, or we can use only, for example, egg whites with a percentage of sugar, but reduced percentage of sugar, or even using fibers like inulin that if you already meet us, you know that we explain a lot about fibers, okay? So by thinking in that direction and working in that direction, we can just improve the process, go faster to the final result. Same safety, that means that the recipe is going to be stable, it's going to be safe exactly in the same direction, and we will reduce costs, we will use time efficiently, okay? For this reason, I decided to create the concept method, okay? Let's go to see where can apply the concept method, no? And always when we explain the concept method, we explain that, okay, we can use the concept method to create gel, gel, compote, creamy, or aerated texture. Like, for example, we can use in French pastry, in modern pastry, American pastry, fillings for viennoiserie, fillings for macarons, fillings for pâte à choux or choux pastry in English. And I'm going just to show you some pictures of examples, are random pictures of things that big concept method can help you to create this kind of texture. Now, for example, here we have a red velvet, and in red velvet, in general, we use a topping, a frosting, we call, and this frosting in general is a lot of dairy product and a lot of sugar, sometimes even 50% of sugar, 50% of dairy products. It's unhealthy, and really bad experience because it's oversweet. Okay, so using the big concept method formulation, we can create a texture for this red velvet cake to be amazing, with taste of, for example, almond without dairy products that can be amazed with a little bit of vanilla. And we create this texture in order to just ensemble the sponge of the red velvet with this creamy texture. Then another example that you can see in the screen is the filling of cookies. Inside of these cookies, I'm not sure if you can see, but there is mango filling, and this mango filling can be created and formulated by using the big concept method. Then if we move to the next slide, we have eclairs, classic product, French product that we can see in a lot of parts in the wall. And these eclairs, all the fillings, gel texture, compote textures, the creamy that we pipe on top, all these kind of recipes can be formulated with the big concept method. Then we have the macarons. The macarons, they are very specific. We've been working on that topic also in Paris in this training that we did in La Notre School, and was really interesting because macarons always they have a lot of chocolate, a lot of sugar inside of the filling, and then also in the cones, in the outside part of the macaron, we have a lot of sugar. So we've been working in order to create fillings with 0% of sugar, and this gives us the possibility to balance the experience because we have the sugar outside of the macaron that this we cannot remove. Why? Because we need sugar in order to create recrystallization process of the saccharose, and like that we have crunchy texture. So outside part we cannot remove sugar for the moment. We will see in the future. We are working on that. But in the fillings we can just remove the sugar, work with 0% of sweetness inside, and like that we balance the whole experience. The sugar that we have outside helps us to balance the final sweetness of the product. And then here we have another example, cupcake fillings, the creamy textures, the same. A lot of fat, a lot of sugar, carrot cake, cupcake is the same. We can create perfect creamy textures that we can pipe and we can use in order to finish this kind of products. And finally, we have from our friend Edan Lesnik. We love him because he is doing an amazing job with viennoiserie and pastry all together. I recommend to you follow him in Instagram because it's amazing what he is doing. And I had the opportunity this year to visit him in New York. He did the big concept course online, and he's amazed about the experience. And I wanted to share with you his creations because he's like mixing viennoiserie and pastry all together. So they finish like croissant dough with mousses, with creamies, with compotes, and different kinds of textures that the final experience is so amazing. So with the and he was studying with us on the first edition of the big concept method that we launched 5 years ago. In that program that I want just to share with you the last slide that is the big concept pastry and formulation program. We just changed the name this year, and this program is online, 100% online, and the next July 7th, we are going to start with the edition of French and Spanish, okay? It will be a pleasure if you join us in order to see pastry in another way and discover a full of possibilities that you have in pastry and not only work like I'm sure you learned it, but the classic way, no, these ingredients, this process, this recipe, and that's it. No, in pastry it's possible to have completely freedom and be free in order to create everything that you want and align your values, your creativity to your pastry creations, okay? Let's go to come back another time to the recipes because I want to explain exactly. No, it's recipe, what we did to move to a recipe that was non-stable to a recipe that was stable, okay? And here, I'm going just to move because now Cassandra is going to make a focus. I'm sure that you can see in that recipe we have, perfect. Just I'm going to drink a little bit of water. Okay, perfect. I'm not sure if you can see, but anyway, I'm going to explain here. As you can see, I think that you can see there is water leaking out of the recipe, okay? Here, it's going to move outside. No sé si se puede ver bien, pero... Espera. Okay, here we have water linking out. Okay, water linking out. In that recipe, we don't have water linking out because it's less stable. What is the difference between these two recipes? Okay, an stable recipe, we have sugar 15%, pectin 1% is our gelée agent. Then we have strawberry puree, okay, whole strawberries. And then we have lime juice. Why we add lime juice? Lime juice we add in order to reduce pH and activate pectin of our recipe. That recipe, because it doesn't have enough dry extract and not enough techniques, is linking water out, okay? What solution we apply in that recipe? What we did was, okay, if we know that one solution is to introduce more dry extract, we introduce a dry extract by also reducing sugar. So we have a recipe less sweet with less sugar, better for health, and we introduce fiber, inulin, native inulin that you already have some masterclass about inulin where we explain how it works and how you can apply it in your recipes. So we reduced sugar and we introduced native inulin. Like that, native inulin also has the ability to catch a lot of water because native inulin is a fiber, and fibers in general, they have the ability to catch water. More or less, it depends what kind of fiber we are going to use, but in general, native inulin has high water catchment capacity for us. So we introduce more dry extract because in the first recipe was 15% of sugar. In the second recipe, we have 18% between sugar and native inulin, so more dry extract, less water because we reduced strawberry puree and whole strawberries in our recipe, more stability, and introducing more dry extract and introducing dry extract that has high water catchment capacity, we control better the water. Then we changed the quantity of pectin. In the first recipe, we have 1% of pectin. We introduced 1.5 of pectin in the second recipe. And wargam, working in team as a thickening agent, 0.2. Pectin is jelly agent, wargam is a thickening agent. Okay, so these two ingredients, they work in order to build the stability. And finally, we have the strawberry puree, the whole strawberries, and the fresh lime juice in order to adjust the pH as I mentioned. Okay, so the solution here was introducing more dry extract, reducing water, introduce another technique that is thickening, like wargam ingredient, in order to control the water that we have in the recipe. Okay, let's go to move to the next recipe. Cream cheese mousse. Okay, we have the unstable recipe with water. Why we use water? Because in general we don't use we don't use milk in our recipes, never. ¿Quieres que lo mueva? Delante. ¿Así?
Exacto, entonces yo lo enfoco y ahora pongo en la tabla.
Just 1 second. Here, I think that you can see that is water linking out. Oh, yes, we can see, yes.
There you go.
Yes, wow, a lot of water, okay? So here is the water linking out of the mousse, okay? This recipe, as I was explaining to you, why we use water? Because in general, we don't use milk in our recipes. If we are going to use a dairy product like cream cheese, never we cross dairy products. Always, or we use milk, or we use cream, or we use cheese, or we use cream cheese, no? But always we work only with one dairy product in order to keep the perfect and balanced flavor that we want of this product, okay? So here we have water, then we have gelatin, sugar, and then we have cream cheese, and then we prepared egg whites and sugar meringue. Okay, this recipe is not stable. As you can see, it's completely unstable. Okay, there is missing a lot of points in here. What we did? Okay, if you see the new recipe, we increased the cream cheese, so we move from 30% of cream cheese to 50% of cream cheese. Why we introduced more cream cheese and reduce the water of the recipe? Because cream cheese has a lot of fat, and fat is dry extract. And this fat increases the dry extract of the recipe and give us much more stability. And then what we did was to prepare a meringue using egg whites, egg white powder, almond wheat from Sosa Company, in order to reinforce the structure of the meringue, because if we have more proteins, the structure of our meringue will have more body, but also proteins, they have high water catchment capacity, and this will help us to control the free water on the freeze and thaw process. Then we added cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is salts that what they do is they interact between the amino acids that we have in the proteins, and they helps us to create a more creamy texture of our meringue. And finally, we have sugar. In the first recipe, we have around 80% of sugar. That is oversweet, that recipe. And even with 18% of sugar, we have water linking out. And in the second recipe, we have only 8% of sugar. That is completely balanced recipe, okay? So here the solution was to reduce water, introduce more cream cheese in our recipe in order to increase flavor and dry extract, and reduce sugar in order to have less sweet recipe, okay? And then another example, that is the recipe comparative, the almond crumble, no, classic recipe, by using 25% of sugar. That is in general what we do, 25% of sugar, 25% of butter, 25% of almond milk, 25% of flour. But what's happened in general is nowadays this recipe, for me is oversweet. And what we did here was to remove butter in order to have a lactose-free crumble. In that product, it doesn't make sense, but you can use this recipe for other products. And we are using, let me check, rice flour. Okay, here there is a mistake. Deodorized coconut oil, not sugar. Sorry, this is, you have to change. We will send to them the final version. Okay? Yes, we are going to send to you, because this is deodorized coconut oil, not sugar. Okay? We check 20 times everything that we share with you, and always we discover something that is not perfect. Okay, so the first ingredient is coconut oil. Okay, the second ingredient, almond flour, perfect rice flour, sugar, salt, and water. Okay, so in that recipe, what we did is to reduce sugar. So in classic recipe, we have 25% of sugar. In the recipe that we developed and we formulated with the concept method, what we did was just to remove sugar and work only with 15%, introducing more almond flour and rice flour. And in order to remove butter from the recipe, we just introduce it, coconut oil and water. Water is so important in the crumble because water is going to hydrate sugar, to hydrate flour, and it's going to create the final crunchy texture that we have in crumble. Okay, so here you have another solution that you can just use, for example, in your recipes. Okay, and you have stable, non-stable recipes. And then in the final part of this document, you have the presentation of our educational offer, where we explain the project, we explain and we share with you the space to learn that we have. Here we have a school in Viladecans, near to Barcelona, Spain, and here we teach also our on-site courses, and we have the online platform that this is where we are today with Anna and with Cassandra teaching you this masterclass. Then we have the super team that we have around 8 people now working on the team, on the project. Here you can see all the information about our program, the Big Concept Pastry and Formulation program that is online, where we teach everything. We start from the molecules, techniques, and then formulation, and you have a lot of products that we explain in very detail, each recipe, each ingredient, why we use, how we balance that recipe. And then you have other courses like the Healthy Petit Gâteau course, that all these programs are online, introductory course of the healthier pastry, vegan pastry, sugar-free pastry, modern vegan pastry course. That program, the modern vegan pastry course, it's amazing how vegan recipes can be so tasty, healthier, and can be in terms of flavor a super tasty products. We have this is very short program with only these 3 products, but are amazing. And then we have our Big Concept Recipe Formulation course in our school. That is 4 days class that we teach since 10 years. We are teaching this program. It's a really complex 4 days class where you learn how to formulate recipes from scratch. And that's it. Thank you very much. We are done. Now we have. Yes, we are going to move to the questions. I hope that I will be able to answer all your questions. Let's go to try, because for sure I don't know everything, okay? What's the percentage of water in thaw again? Alan, can you clarify this question, because I don't understand. It's related to what, okay? Can we go to the next question, please? What about UK people taste? I'm from Romania, but I'm living in UK, and it's so hard for me to understand their taste texture. I'm going to explain, Elena, what I do in general in order to understand this. I move to a supermarket and I taste different products. This is something that always, when I'm traveling to another country to teach the Big Concept method, always what I do before to start the preparation, I go to 2 or 3 supermarkets different. I buy products and I taste in order to understand their needs, in terms of sweetness and intensity of flavor. Okay, so for example, now I don't need, but when I was traveling to China 6-7 years ago, always I was visiting supermarkets in order to taste products, in order to understand, okay, how they they understand pastry, or how they need to be the intensity of the recipes, because each country can be a little bit different. So in UK, you can go to Whole Foods, I think that you have in London, for example, and it's an amazing place to buy like different desserts and you taste them. And you will understand the big pictures, sweetness, intensity of flavor, creamy textures, how they work. And you can buy, like, for example, dairy, in the dairy section, buy like 3 products, pastry section, buy 3 products, taste, and you will understand what is the direction. This is what I do, and with this information, and I can align all my recipes and formulate all my recipes in that direction. Yes, Marvin, perfect. Dry extract that you need in that recipe is around 30%, okay? Minimum 30%. xanthan gum, I will start 0.1%, okay? Because 1% is too much. Needs to be 0.1 because xanthan gum has really high water catchment capacity. Here, if that recipe, what I can recommend to you is just send us an email. Will be easier to info@jordibordas.com with the recipe because I need to see all the ingredients. And send us the recipe in percentage, okay? And very fast, I will give you the solution because if this recipe is without dairy products, you need an emulsifier inside and you need to have fat. So I need to see the total recipe in order to understand, and we will send to you the solution by email, okay? But in general, 1% of xanthan gum is too much, 0.1 needs to be more than enough, 34% of dry extract, more than enough, and needs to be perfectly stable. Maybe it's because you are not using enough techniques in your recipe. I will give you the solution by mail in the next weeks, okay? Next question, Elena. On the course of the concept, we can learn how to create desserts for diabetic people. Yes, this is one of the focus, reduction of sugar or sugar-free recipes by using, for example, polyalcohols that we explained in the course, but I'm not super fan of the polyalcohols. Now, Elena, when I work with sugar-free recipes for diabetic people, I'm focused into ingredients. Two ingredients in order to substitute sugar. One is oligofructose, and the other one is allulose. Okay, you have, Elena, you have one course that is the sugar-free pastry course that we have. It's a very short program that we have with different products that we explain with different sweeteners that you can substitute sugar in order to create people pastry for diabetic people. Okay, you have this option.
Participate in the Big Concept. This is the website of the Big Concept program.
Yes, and for sure, this program, the short program, is just recipes, and then you have the extended program, the Big Concept online course, the one that I was explaining to you, that here we will teach you how to create recipes adapted to your needs, in that case sugar-free or with less sugar. For sure, we explain this because it's one of my main goals in my life, to reduce sugar for the people, okay, or remove. I live in Germany. Could the professor please elaborate on the German texture and level of sweetness? The same, Alan. I need to understand the market, and how I analyze the market is, in general, going to a supermarket and taste different products in order to understand sweetness, textures, intensity of flavor, and then I can, when I understand formulation, with the concept method, I can create my own recipes, okay? Yes, here, Alan, when using inulin and its sweetening capacity is almost zero. Inulin, native inulin or inulin in cold from Sosa company, this inulin has 10 times less sweetness capacity than sugar. That means that inulin we use in order to reduce sweetness in my recipes. I explained, if I have 30% of sugar in one recipe and it's oversweet and I want to reduce sweetness, what I do is, okay, I just keep the sugar that I need in the recipe. That is balanced for me. So if with 8% of sugar, this recipe is completely balanced for me, I'm going to keep this 8% of sugar. And the rest of the sugar, I'm going to substitute for inulin. And this inulin is going to give me to the recipe dry extract and water catchment capacity, and will control the water to the freezing and thawing process. Okay, so this is the way how we work with inulin in order to reduce sweetness in the recipes, or, for example, to increase the stability of the recipes because we have high water catchment capacity. This you have, if you go to the Jordi Bordas website, you have blog posts, you have a lot of information about inulin, and then you have in YouTube channel, you have many master classes that we already did the last 5 years explaining inulin in pastry. And go directly, Alan, to this information and you will find a lot of solutions. Okay? Thank you.
I'm coming.
No worries.
Inulin is made with inulin, chicory derivative.
Native insulin is the
No, she made a mistake. She corrected.
yes, perfect.
Inulin.
Native inulin is from the chicory root, yes, and it's produced mainly in Central Europe, in Netherlands, Belgium, France, all these countries, they produce chicory, and from the chicory roots, we remove the fiber. Chicory roots, they have around more than 20% of fiber that is native inulin. Okay, perfect.
Those are all the questions.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much for all your time. Thank you very much for following us, for support our project. We already shared the link of our next edition that starts on Monday, July 7, that we have places still available. And in that course, you are going to learn how to formulate your recipes from scratch, adapted to your needs. That is, I think, that what we need in pastry, to be completely free in order to create our pastry aligned to our values and our needs. Okay, thank you very much for your time. I hope that this masterclass of around 1 hour and 7 minutes was interesting for you. Kiss you and see you soon. Bye bye. Love you. Bye bye.